purposes. Counselors, we're going to start tonight on page 33, the Law Department. Law Department Personal Services.
Mr. President,
Counselor Conry.
may I, before we start, there seems to be some confusion on some parts with regard to the budget. And I'd like to, through you, ask the city solicitor if she could enlighten us a bit. At the budget session that we had on Saturday, a motion was made to roll back the 2008 budgeted salaries to the 2007 level and to request the mayor to review the collective bargaining agreements. I would like to know, and I think some of my colleagues would like to know, can this council legally reduce the bargain raises if the contracts have been signed and are included in the 2008 departmental budgets? And I'd like to ask the city solicitor if she could enlighten us a bit on that.
The short answer is yes, assuming that you're speaking about contracts that are new or have not been funded previously. In other words, if there had been a contract entered into in '06 that was a 3-year contract and it was funded at the time, those were obligated to continue funding through conclusion. Contracts that have expired that would be starting anew with the '08 funding, you're not obligated to fund them. It's essentially the same question as was asked before when other contracts were in front of us a few months ago.
So we cannot actually have a blanket motion not to fund those. These contracts or these raises, do we have to go through line by line in order to void them or change them?
You have to go through the budget lines and reduce the amounts as you wish, each one separately, if that is your wish. For example, since we're on my budget next, if you wanted to reduce the first line on page 33, for whatever reason, and I was not part of an ongoing union contract, which I am not, somebody would make the motion to reduce that amount to X or reduce it by X, and that would be it.
Just for my clarification, if we have a contract that is signed and it has been approved prior to the 2007 budget, and we choose to reduce the salary line on that budget by X number of dollars, we can't reduce a contract, but we can reduce that salary line. Say it's, I'll use for an example, a clerical position. If a clerical position is scheduled to be $43,000 and we reduce it to a previous year's level of $41,000 exclusive of the contract, just for the sake of reducing that particular line, what happens when the money for that position runs out?
You can't do that. And that's actually a good example. The clerical is one of the contracts that's scheduled to expire in '08.
I don't intend on cutting their
I'm just,
contract.
we're talking, well, but you are cutting their contract if the position is funded for 40, if a position is funded for 42, or is slated to be paid 42, and you cut it back to 38, you can't do that. What you can do is you can cut the total amount of the salaries for that department, and everybody, and the department will have to figure out what to do with that money, which could very well result in a layoff. You can't reduce a set salary that's in a contract.
I thought we couldn't reduce a page or a group.
You can't do it by just going to the bottom of the page. That's why you have to look at each item. There are some that you're not going to be able to reduce, and there are some that you will be able to reduce. So you need to know which ones are in the middle of, for example, a multi-year contract. I can tell you which ones are because I conferred with Human Resources about this earlier, anticipating that there might be some confusion and having gotten questions from various counselors.
They are.
Clerical expires in '08. The Library Association expires in June '08. The firefighters and the teachers that were just funded, and I don't know when they expire. I'm assuming that they're 3-year contracts. I would certainly stand to be corrected on that, but that would be 2011 that they would expire. So all of the increases that are set forth in those contracts have to be honored.
But the specific line item can be reduced.
Specific line items can be reduced. But I guess I'm having trouble with the example you gave me was a line item that only has one position in it.
Exactly, that's my...
And if that person is in one of these unions, you can't do that. You'd have to find your cut somewhere else in that department.
Councilor DeSalvatore?
You failed to mention the police. I know that
Correct.
that's a little on the confusing side. We have one that we've passed recently, or that has been passed recently, and we've got one I think that's in negotiation now, isn't there?
They are not working under a current contract.
My
They are working
understanding is
under
their
an
contract
expired
expired.
contract.
My understanding is the same as the council presidents from conferring with Human Resources. And my understanding of the contracts that have expired as of this year, some of them expired last year,
06.
some of them have been previously expired, but at least they are not in place now. They have expired. Our police, DPW, dispatchers, wastewater, the inspectors, and the specialty skills. And again, I'll stand to be corrected if there's another one out there. But those are the ones that I am aware of have expired, and '08 forward has not been funded.
So you're saying that these fall under the blanket petition that we passed Saturday?
Nothing falls under the blanket petition. We need to continue to go line by line and reduce at the end of this process.
Correct.
Or sometime during this process.
And the reason for that is because while I think the motion, and I wasn't here, and it's not my place to discuss the intent of the motion, but I took the motion as an intent of the council to freeze salaries at the '07 level, to put all of us that are coming before you on notice that that's what you were anticipating doing to one extent or another. I also assumed that you intended it to be freezing to the extent that you're allowed by law to freeze, and that would exclude the clerical, library association, firefighters, and teachers, for example, as far as the amount of pay and benefits per position as negotiated in those contracts. The second part of that motion was to ask the mayor to revisit contracts, and again, I assume, and I think it was mentioned here again tonight, that the intent was to go back and talk to the unions about whether anybody that has either a negotiated contract or a closed contract would reopen. And you can certainly ask the mayor to do that. He is not required to do that. And the unions are certainly all free to say yes or no within this period of time. And again, I will stand corrected by our Labor Council. I think it would be impossible to actually schedule and conduct any negotiations, even if parties were willing. So the council still has to deal with the budget, each department and each line that it wishes to consider a reduction for. And the reason for that rule is actually the language in the statute which says that you can reduce amounts. And that's been interpreted to mean the amounts in each line or each category, depending upon how individual communities' budgets are set up, but not just a bottom line, not just take 5 million off the bottom of the 95, for example, or take 2% off of every page. All of those types of strategies have already been rejected. Other communities have tried to do them. So the best practice and the best advice I can give you, if your intent is to make cuts, whether they're salaries or lights or anything else that you want to cut, is to cut the line item in whatever fashion will make it clear to Mr. Saracen, who I think is trying to keep track for you.
Councilor Clark?
Thank you, Mr. President. So, when we first started our budget debates, and the way we started was line by line. That would be the correct way to go about
Absolutely.
things, and we would have to revisit that when we conclude
Yes.
the next couple of days. That's fine, because we'll have at least some figures on
Right.
what to do with those lines. Thank you.
And frankly, that's, I mean, I didn't attend the sessions, and but I did watch some of them on TV, and as an observer, was how I interpreted what was going on, was that the motion was to save time to get through the process, and that there was an understanding, and I believe that Council President indicated that it was in a memo that I wrote last year when we thought that we might come to this, that reductions have to be item by item, line by line.
And just for time constraints, we are looking at scheduling a meeting for Wednesday of next week, just so that it's posted in case we don't get our business finished by Tuesday. So we've got it's going to be a busy week next week. So I want to make sure that we don't rush things for the sake of rushing things, and our committee as a whole meeting on Tuesday, and then push ourselves into a corner and not be able to finish our business by Tuesday evening. So out of a precaution, I'm having the city clerk schedule and post a meeting for Wednesday if necessary. Any other? Councilor DeSalvatore.
For clarification only, clerical, library, firefighters, and teachers, if we wish to reduce any line item amount having to do with pay, we can do the line item amount, but we are not touching the pay rate. Is that what you're saying? The line
No,
item?
we'd have to look at each line item, because I don't have at the tip of my tongue how they're all set out. And I think the example that the president gave was a department that may have, for example, one clerk. And so the amount in that line item would be the anticipated pay compensation for that person for the entire 08.
Understood.
You can't cut that, because those people are in a contract that expires, and the first year of that contract was accepted and approved and funded by a previous council. If there was a department that had, who knows how, just pick a number, and had a total, you could cut the total, say it was 20 people and it was,
$5 million.
$500,000, you could say, well, I think that that's too much for 20 people in this position, and cut it back to 400,000, then that department head is going to have to figure out how to pay who's left the wage that's established in the contract, and some people will be laid off.
Okay, thank you. What's that?
Thank you. Again, page 33, Law Personal Services, amount requested, $102,360. Amount allowed, $102,360. Councilor Clark.
Just a point of order, Mr. President. With what the solicitor just said, we could, I suggest that we keep on going the way we're going,
Yep.
and not start with the single lines now, but just keep going the way we are and then hit the single lines later?
Correct.
Even though we know for sure that that's the way to go now.
Your choices, but
I think the way we're going is just fine. And hitting those particular lines afterwards.
Any questions or concerns on page 33? Moving on to page 34. Law expenses, amount requested, $41,000. Amount allowed, $34,400. Counselor DeSalvatore.
I'm looking at significant cuts, and I'm questioning how this is going to affect your department, and whether or not we'll be able to still get the job done with these cuts.
Well, thank you for asking. And that's actually the page in my budget that I have the most concern about, because, as you know, that's the page that takes care of our expenses and our staff. And without a secretary, a computer, materials, paper, telephone equipment, what you have from John and I is our physical presence at a meeting or at something. You don't have the preparation and the backup that we need to do our job. And I think that what will happen is with these reductions, there will be a reduction in services because we will not be able to pay our staff and take care of the matters in our office and cover our expenses. What you need to understand is that the way this budget is set up is the first page are considered salaries and the second page are considered expenses. If we were to charge by the hour for our time, for example, and charge $175 an hour, which is a modest amount in this day and age. I think some of you will probably be asking me about some of the other expenses later and how much we pay special counsel. And if any of you have hired a lawyer in the last year, I think you know that that would be considered a modest amount. But let's just, for argument's sake, use that figure. The city would be entitled to about 11 hours of John's and my time a week. Now, if that's what we were paid, if we were paid by the hour, something that was a regular hourly rate that we would be charging a private client or that we pay when we hire special counsel, page 2 wouldn't be quite as important, because what an attorney does when he or she sets their hourly rate is to figure in the cost of their clerical, the cost of their administration, the cost of their office, their overhead, their materials. Some of you were here the first time I presented a budget to this council and might remember that I cut all the law materials. I cut the Mass General Laws, I cut the Code of Mass Regs. Those were hard copy materials the city was paying for attorneys that work for the city to use. And I felt that there was a set in City Hall that the people who work in City Hall could use. Those materials are in the city clerk's office, at least they were back then. I assume they still are. They're available in the public library, and our law library is a very short walk from here, and it is also open to the public. So I felt that that was a savings. You shouldn't be providing materials to private attorneys when we have access to this online anyway, already in our office. So I feel that I have made cuts in the past to assist the city in this. And yes, there will be some reduction in service. There will be some things that A, will not be able to be done or will not be able to be done as quickly because For example, my secretary spends about 20 hours a week on City of Fitchburg business. Mr. Barrett's staff spends about the same, sometimes more, sometimes less. And if you know Mary in Mr. Barrett's office, you know that she acts also as our claims administrator. In order to continue paying these people, we are going to have them do work for other clients. That's part of our overhead. So yes, there will be some reduction in service as a result of the cuts on page 2.
My concern is that we are paralyzing an important department by cutting them possibly too much and artificially meeting our goals, where eventually we're going to pay heavily because we have stripped a department that serves to protect us, keep us out of trouble, and to follow through with litigation processes. I know we can't put any money back into this, but I would highly urge at least not cutting any further. And possibly even at the end of our process, if we're able to free up enough money, revisit certain areas, especially when it comes to heating oils, electricity, law department, fire department, police department, places where this city is going to feel an impact, that we try to get those monies back into places, the extras back into places that it belongs. Thank you.
Councilor Conry?
Yes, a comment and a question for the city solicitor. First, as the city solicitor said, if you've hired a lawyer recently, you know what the charges are. If I may be so bold to say, $175 an hour is a hell of a bargain for the city, a real bargain.
I wouldn't mind getting it, I don't.
I know you don't, but would be a bargain. I have a question regarding the clerical and administrative, which has been cut. Can you tell me why that is entered under the expense section and is not in personal services?
I'm assuming because these people are not city employees and it's considered a support for the solicitor and the assistant, but I was not part of setting this up, and I would yield to the auditor if he has any background on that, but I would assume that those are the reasons, is it's considered to be an expense. It is mentioned in the ordinance that the city solicitor may have clerical assistance paid for by the city to support the office. So I'm assuming it probably goes back to the 60s as a style.
Solicitor's correct. Any personal services, those line items are usually associated with the city payroll. These clerks are not on the city payroll. However, the solicitors are. So that's why they're on personal services.
Okay.
Which is why I said, if this page 2 is cut, page 1, you know, we'll still show up for meetings, but we may not have 20 copies of something. And we may not have been able to finish something that somebody wants because our staff is not going to be available to the city 20 hours in each of our offices going forward.
I would like to just make another comment. I have been collecting some data over the past couple of years, and I would like to sit down with you to determine if it would be beneficial for this city to create a law department.
I'd be very happy to do that. I've been a municipal attorney for almost 25 years at this point, and John Barrett, who's our assistant, has been doing this work for 20 years, and I think that, again, many of you who were here before I came know that the city was very well served by other very experienced solicitors prior, and between John and I, we have probably represented over a dozen different communities, including I was a solicitor in another city for 10 years. So I think we have quite a bit of experience and information, And I can tell you, I've worked for a couple of towns that went through severe financial crises, and I'd be very happy to do that with any council or any committee that wants to sit down and talk about what it would take to reorganize the law department.
Thank you.
Councilor DiMartino.
I see that it wasn't signed. It wasn't.
Correct.
The budget wasn't signed. That you
Correct.
didn't sign it.
That's correct.
So therefore you disagree with this.
What I had a concern about is, and it may have been something lost in translation, I think you know there were lots of back and forth between the mayor's office and every department head, and my department is one of the smaller ones. However, the requested amounts on page 2 and 3, the second and third pages of my budget, are not my final requested amounts.
Oh.
And that's why I did not sign, and I don't know why make it to print, to be honest with you. I had on the second page, I had been asked by the mayor to make some changes, as everybody had been asked by the mayor to make some changes, and he had asked me to reduce other legal down to $95,000, and to reduce the other page down to 35, and I asked if, just orally, if it was all right if I made those cuts by readjusting some of the figures on the last 2 pages. The answer came back yes. So on my second page, I restored clerical, and my bottom line would have been $44,000, and on the other page, I left the labor negotiator and $1,000 for filing fees, and I zeroed out everything else, so that page would have been 86, both of which total to the 130 that I thought that I was allowed for those 2 pages. And that's why I didn't sign my budget, because I didn't believe that my last set of requests and my changes had made it to print.
We've been through all the budgets, and the veterans was cut in half, which is different than this. But this coming from the page, there's no increases at all in both salaries of the
Correct.
solicitors,
Correct.
which I don't believe, but this is the first time we've come across this since we started doing the budget, I thought. I haven't remember going through any of the budget and seeing at least not some sort of a raise given. And this is the first time in this particular budget. And the registry and other fees, they've gone up at the registry. They didn't go down. And yet there's a decrease in here. There's something not quite right about it. And I'm wondering, am I missing something? Could I address you, Mr. Saracen? There's something very wrong with this budget.
I think I'd have to refer you to the mayor.
Oh, okay. Okay, because it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense at all.
I think the term the mayor used in response to the city council was disrespect. So I guess in the mayor's response to maybe another department head would probably be disrespect.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. President?
Yes.
Can I make a few remarks about what we do, just to update some of the newer councilors? I won't be long. And this is certainly not everything that we do, but just this past year, the city solicitor and the assistant city solicitor reviewed over 100 contracts, reviewed and either defended or prosecuted over 60 claims against the city, most of that work being done out of John Barrett's office, with Mary being the claims administrator. In the past 3 or 4 years, well, just this year, we recovered almost $600,000 in taxes and water and sewer charges owed to the city in just one matter. We probably would not have gotten very much if we didn't have a very prompt inquiry by the then acting treasurer and a knowledge in my office of bankruptcy, because that's where this entity found itself, and we were able to respond quickly to the packet that was served on the city really within a couple of days and recovered just about everything. We probably would have been in with unsecured creditors getting whatever on the dollar if that hadn't been done. In fiscal '03, we had over $600,000 again released to the city for wastewater, and in '06 we obtained $220,000 from Fibermark's bankruptcy also. So I think you can see just from '03 through the present, my department has brought in certainly more than it's cost the city to have a law department for those years. And that doesn't include a check for $23,000 in insurance that we turned in yesterday, and other much smaller amounts and other amounts that are six figures but are not as impressive as $600,000 over the last 5.5 years. And it also doesn't account for the hundreds of thousands that we have probably prevented ourselves from being charged by appropriately defending the city in many, many matters. Would be happy to answer any other questions. The law department is required by ordinance to do certain things like keep a docket, do certain work and approvals on contracts, and prepare deeds and other documents for the city. And so again, those things will certainly be slowed down. They will not stop, and we will do our best, but there clearly will be a slowdown. And anything that isn't absolutely required by ordinance may unfortunately go to the bottom of the list, so that we can fulfill our code and statutory obligations to the city.
Move. Councilor Donnelly?
Thank you, President. I just want to know if any other counselor has seen any budget remain the same since 2006.
No.
The salaries are all flat for both the city solicitor and the assistant city solicitor. In '06, the numbers requested are down, and even on the last page, they're substantially down. But as the city solicitor has just told us, it looks like we should be investing a little bit more here for our protection. And it looks like the mayor is trying to protect either the city or himself with labor negotiator. That's the only thing that went up. That went up to $85,000. I'd like to see the labor negotiators, that one line item cut to zero.
Second, if it's a motion.
Wait, no.
I second that.
That's,
Are we off of page,
we're on to another.
we off of page 34 and on to page 35?
Yeah. Who's the labor negotiator?
Doesn't matter.
Can I just for 1 second out of procedure, page 35, law, other legal expenses, amount requested $102,000, amount allowed by the mayor $93,500. There's a motion on the table to reduce the labor negotiator from $85,000 down to zero. Councilor DiMartino speaking on the motion.
Speaking of, who is the labor negotiator?
Attorney Greg Angelini from Leominster. He's been our labor counsel for many years.
Oh, I know that. I know, Mr. That's an awful big step. That's an awful big increase. My God, that's an awful increase.
Councilor Clark.
Thank you, Mr. President. Deb, is this figure like that because he has a lot more negotiating to do this year, or is this a carryover from last year?
I believe that we're going to have a request to supplement this year's next week. There won't be a carryover. We are anticipating exceeding the appropriation from last year in that line item. Again, I don't handle the labor Mr. Angelini bills by the hour against that line. So I will just tell you, if you do cut it, by any amount, and we need this, I will simply come back and ask you to find a way to fund something for Labor Council if that's what we need. I think I've come to this council before when I've needed to ask for an increase in a line item, or I've needed something to handle a legal matter, and I will certainly do that again if need be.
I'm just trying to figure out if, I mean, it looks like most of the contracts are starting up this coming year, or that just seems to be 85,000. You would think if you had a lot of contracts coming up on the docket, that would be a reasonable figure. But I don't think we have that. It doesn't look like, it looks like most of the contracts, the big ticket ones, school, that's set for
Fire.
3 years. I mean,
Fire
it
is set.
just seems to be
As of
bit
right,
high.
just a point of clarification, as of right now, the only ones that we have are
Fire,
teachers
school, yeah.
and fire that are going off into the next 3 years, or 2 years at least.
Right.
So with the actions that we've taken over the last couple of days, if you don't think that's going to cost some money, you're fooling yourselves, because all those have to go back to the table, and they're probably not going to be as amicable as they left the table when they get back to the table. So I don't think $85,000 is the right number, but I definitely don't think that zero is the right number. Councilor Conry.
Through you, Mr. President, to Mr. Saracen, do you have any indication as to how much additional monies is going to be requested of the council for the labor negotiator?
This year?
Yes, sir.
In 07?
07, yes.
As Deb has pointed out, I believe there's an appropriation coming before council for $15,000 for that department, most of which is for the labor negotiator. And if I could add, I think more of the work, rather than negotiating contracts, I think more of the labor negotiator handles more grievances and troublesome issues with the unions. And I think, as President has pointed out, with the budget problems, it's anticipated it will require more time.
If I may, Mr. President, a couple of things that Labor Council does for, maybe labor negotiator may not be the best term for that line, because I think Mr. Saracen is correct. I think it's more, Mr. Angelini represents us at the Labor Relations Commission and the Civil Service Commission, and we do have matters from time to time that come up in those forums, and that is his area of expertise. It's where he represents us often. I think the negotiation has not all of the hours that are spent negotiating have been done with Mr. Angelini included. But again, I would stand corrected if he thinks I'm wrong on that. But that's been my understanding as well.
Councilor Clark.
Thank you, Mr. President. Madam Solicitor, that figure, does that include his representation of the school department as well? Or is there a line, I should know that, but is there a line on the school department budget for labor negotiator?
Correct.
There is.
Department has their own budget for labor.
There is, but Mr. Angelini does do some work for us for the school department as well. But they do have their own special counsel. They have a lot of other things that come up, like special ed issues and things like that.
Thank you.
If I could add, yeah, he is the labor negotiator also for the school department.
But not for a lot of their other matters. They do have other special counsel that handles non-labor school matters.
But the 75 grand that he's getting here is not the end-all. There's also more from the school committee and school department, correct? Thank you.
Councilor Donnelly.
as was stated, at $175 an hour, it's a bargain. People that use attorneys usually get into trouble somehow. Sometimes it's wise, especially in real estate, which I know a little bit about, that you hire an attorney first to set up your contracts so that you don't get into trouble. It usually costs less to do it that way than it does to sign a contract and then not put everything that you wanted in, or it becomes disadvantageous to you. Then you hire an attorney, it costs you more money for attorney fees to get out. I'm wondering how much money we spend in negotiations with the labor attorney to get a good contract or a good bargain for the city, or is this money going to be paid because we didn't use the attorney to set up our contracts the right way, and now we're going to find out how to solve them after?
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Excuse me, Mr. President,
Yes.
could you go over what the,
The motion is to reduce the labor negotiators' dollar amount on page 35 from $85,000 to zero.
thank you.
All those in favor with a show of hands. 2 in favor. All those opposed? Motion doesn't carry.
I'd like to make a motion to reduce it to $30,000.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to reduce the labor negotiator line item from 85 to $30,000. Motion made and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor? 3 in favor. All those opposed? Give it a
Motion
much.
to reduce that line item from 85,000 to 75,000.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to reduce the labor negotiators' pay from 85,000 to 75,000. Any discussion? All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in favor. All those opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4. The motion carries. Anything else on that page, councilors? Seeing none, we'll move on to planning on page 41.
Turn to you.
Solicitor.
And I don't want you to think in any way, shape, or form your comments have gone unheeded, because we do have work to do at the end of this budget, and that has a big circle on it, okay? We need to revisit that in our negotiations.
Thank you.
Councilors, Planning Department, page 41. Amount requested, $263,407. Amount allowed by the mayor, $129,337.
Mr. President, I wonder if I could preface
Absolutely.
budget with a few remarks
Yep.
about the function of my department. I wanted to explain clearly the role of the Office of the Planning Coordinator in providing professional services to the city in several areas which I feel are essential to our future growth. We provide essential staff services to the Planning Board, Conservation Commission, and the Disability Commission. We administer the Community Development Block Grant Program and the Home Program, which annually provides $2 million to the city. Manage the city's information systems, including the provision of technical assistance to all city departments, the development and maintenance of the city's GIS database, our email server, the public safety network, and the maintenance of the city's web page and internet connection. The initiation of strategic planning initiatives designed to encourage private investment, improve the downtown commercial district, and increase the city's all-important tax base. These initiatives have included the North Street Corridor Improvement Plan, the Plymouth Street Phase 1 and Phase 2 initiatives, and the recently announced Elm Street initiative. These initiatives help transform the appearance of areas previously overwhelmed with blight, disinvestment, and abandonment, and have built a foundation for future growth in the city. Also, the application for and administration of numerous competitive grants received by the city through the planning office. Some recent examples over the last 3 years include a $1 million Community Development Action Grant for capital improvements to Putnam Place on behalf of the Fitchburg Redevelopment Authority to renovate existing office and industrial space for economic expansion in our downtown. A $500,000 urban self-help grant from the state for much-needed infrastructure improvements to Coolidge Park, which will include roadway, water, and drainage improvements. We also intend to apply for a second phase of improvements. A $225,000 urban self-help grant to create the new West Fitchburg Steam Line Trail Park. A $6 million federal 108 loan to provide financing for the improvements at Putnam Place, which were completed in 2005. A $287,000 Massachusetts Get the Lead Out grant to provide financing through our housing programs for the abatement of lead paint in our older homes. And a preliminary application for a $222,453 CDAG grant to fund water line, roadway, sidewalk, and streetlight improvements along Sawyer Passway in support of the Micron Medical expansion. Since 1999, the Office of the Planning Coordinator has generated more than $16.5 million in new funding, a total of nearly $13 for every dollar spent on planning office personnel by the city during this period. Most importantly, as these grants rarely provide any administrative funding of their own, their receipt would not have been possible without adequate funding for planning office staff to apply for and administer them. In recognition of the unprecedented fiscal crisis currently being faced by the city, the Office of the Planning Coordinator has absorbed the largest percentage reduction in its budget that's before you of any city department. As you look in your budget summaries tonight, you will note that at a time when other departments have increased by as much as 7%, the budget submitted to you for the Planning Office has been decreased by a total of 34%, from $275,831 to only $182,187. We have done this by reducing overall departmental expenses and by using a one-time technology fund to cover 100% of the costs of the MIS manager's position, as well as 1/3 of the planning coordinator's position, my position. In our continuing effort to assist the city in responding to its fiscal crisis, this office has prepared and submitted to the mayor a plan which would significantly reduce the city's overall technology budget by consolidating the purchases of computers, software, phones, cell phones, copy machines, and related equipment through a centralized technology purchase process. We feel this plan could save the city tens of thousands of dollars per year over the coming years. The mayor has indicated his initial support of this plan and has agreed to work with us in implementing it. Other savings may be possible if the city considers transferring funds from capital accounts under the CDBG program, such as the demolition account, which currently has a balance of $222,000. This fund could be used to provide for the salary of a second Board of Health code inspector, for example, thus reducing the city's budget deficit by an additional $55,000 to $60,000. This is an eligible expense under the CDBG program and could be done at the cost of demolishing 1 to 2 less buildings over the coming year. We have also responded to the council's request that we investigate the possibility of transferring the police drug enforcement monies under CDBG to retain an officer's position within that department. I have provided each of you with a memo on that matter, which concludes that this transfer, while it would require an approval from HUD, could be successfully implemented to restore at least one police officer's position. I have spoken with a police chief on this matter, and he indicated that he would support this action and will speak to the mayor about it. As you look at our budget this evening, it is my sincere hope that you will consider the greatly reduced city share of funds already being presented to you, as well as the extraordinary efforts of this office in developing creative solutions to help reduce the city's overall budget. And I would be pleased to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Just a question, one quick question on the orders that were received from for the Finance Committee on the CDBG orders in reference to administration. Do you know what the amount was that was recommended to the Finance Committee for administration?
It
was $275,000.
$75,000.
275,000? So this line item here that says less CDBG funds allowed by the mayor, 201, is actually 275?
Those funds would not include costs that the city pays to, that the CDBG program pays to the city for services, such as rent, auditing services, purchasing services, and the like.
So just how much of the administration on this page was the community development administrator's position funded with enough CDBG funds? Where it says 201, is it really not 201?
There are sufficient funds with the passage of the appropriations request this evening to fund the community development planner's position.
So the money is in the from the CDBG funds to fund the position that's been cut out.
Yes.
And again, that the community development administrator is 96% funded by CDBG. So whether that position is there or not there, it doesn't affect the fiscal crisis of the city that we face currently.
That's accurate, yes.
The
That's
money,
why I signed this notation at the bottom of the page.
the job that the person does, and I know that it was part of your statement, but the part of the job that the community development administrator does is facilitate the monies coming in from the CDBG in total?
That's right. That's a critical component of our administration of the CDBG program.
For the reporting purposes, correct?
Right. A number of functions that individual provides.
So is there any rationale whatsoever as to why a position that is totally funded by CDBG and not replaced by police salary or anything else that we've been discussing over the code, health enforcement, or anything like that, would be pulled from our budget?
You would have to ask the mayor that
Yeah.
question.
Okay. Councilor Connery?
I think you asked the question, but obviously, you've been able to sit down with the mayor and discuss your budget, correct?
I've had discussions with the mayor. I intend to have additional discussions with the mayor.
My question is, I look at this sheet and with the personal services on it. Of course, we all know that the neighborhood liaison has been finally removed from the budget, which this council, prior to my even coming on the council, wanted to see dissolved. But as Council President Joseph said, you said you had to ask the mayor. Well, if you've had some discussions with the mayor, what is his rationale for taking this position out when it's not being funded by the city? I just don't understand that.
They've scheduled a hearing on that for, I believe, next Thursday. And a letter was delivered today to that employee.
From who?
It's from the mayor.
Why would there be a hearing? Is there something wrong with the position? Is there something wrong with the person? I don't understand.
It wasn't a disciplinary hearing. It was a hearing scheduled for the discussion of removal in light of the city's fiscal crisis, I believe.
Well, it's funded by CDBG money. I don't understand. You're not going to be able to transfer that money that pays for that person's salary into the city budget. So what's the big deal?
I can't operate the program without sufficient personnel to do so.
Correct. So you're not going to take that allocation, and we're not going to apply it to the cemetery department or the Department of Public Works or anywhere else, because under the law, we can't. Correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Counselor Clark? Counselor Donnelly?
Thank you, Mr. President. So there's no rationale from the department head. The mayor has not communicated anything to you about why. It's not solving the budget crisis at all because we can't transfer the money. I wonder if he'll use the labor negotiator to, at the meeting, maybe he can spend some money that way.
And it's funded.
And it's
In the
fun.
request that we received through the Finance Committee for Administration, it's funded.
Another one I can't understand. Thank you.
Counselor DeSalvatore?
David, for clarification and to lead into an observation at least, the percentile here, percent non-city, this funding comes from CDBG, correct? When I'm looking at 96% funded, that's a CDBG funding, and then the remaining 4% is the responsibility of the city?
For the community development administrator, it was 96% because 4% or $2,000 was allocated for support of the Human Rights Commission, which wasn't an eligible activity under the CDBG program. So we had to show HUD that we were being honest about the work responsibilities of this employee.
Okay, so using allowed by mayor's figures, I've got $2,142, I think it is. That's the human rights? Is that what you said?
Actually, $2,000 even
Oh.
was set aside for the Human Rights Commission for sending the packet out and for helping them with their meetings.
And that's being paid by the city?
And that was being paid by the city. However, under this scenario, that will not be paid by the city. It depends on what I can, I need to work something out with the mayor about.
If the employee was held, that employee, 4% of that employee's responsibility, so to speak, is the human rights.
That's right.
All right, that's an easier way of looking at it. And the rest of the responsibilities of that employee, it was exactly what?
Was working with the CDBG program. I can get more detail if you like.
Please.
Okay.
Principally, she administers the CDBG program, which includes submitting the application each year, preparing the 5-year and 1-year plan that we're required to submit on behalf of the city, setting up all the electronic fund systems for each activity that gets funded, and doing the individual drawdowns for each activity. She also manages 6 of the subcontracts that are given for the public service agencies and for some of the memorandum of agreements with the various departments like the police department. She's responsible for monitoring all of those activities, and at the end of the year, she's responsible for preparing a detailed, comprehensive report on all of the activities that we completed during the year, whether or not they met our goals in the 1-year plan and the 5-year plan, and if so, why not?
Also, she does project management for certain projects in town, notably the Cogswell Park forest management work that's going on was her project. Also, the EPA Brownfields grant, she did Monument Park, but more currently, the Cogswell Park Survey project, and also she's been doing the open space plan, which is about 95% complete in and of itself.
And holding seminars on...
And that's right, the fair housing, she was handling the fair housing work over at the 2 meetings over at the fire station were her responsibility.
With the respects of the fact that most of this wage for that position, keeping a name and a face off of the position, most of the wage is paid by CDBG funding, doesn't come from the city at all. It sounds like it would be a great loss, and I see absolutely no reason. And I believe we either need a reasoning or should be requesting through maybe a letter from City Council for reinstatement of that position.
We cannot ask for a reinstatement, but I believe we can ask for a reason.
I'd at least like to have the reason from the mayor as to why that position is being cut when it is virtually costing us nothing.
And there's no plans to replace that fund with something else.
Right.
Councilor DiMartino.
Looking at that money, is it possible that he's going to take that money and put it in for one position up at the Board of Health, like we did before? There used to be 2 Board of Health people used to come in under this before, and then it came back, was brought into the budget. Is it possible he's going to use this money and put it into the Board of Health? Is that something?
We've already, I've had discussions with the mayor about the one Board of Health employee, and in fact, you may recall an appropriation request came into finance for that purpose, for
Yeah.
essentially CDBG adjustments to fund one Board of Health employee.
So it's in
I
there.
mentioned in my remarks was the possibility of funding another Board of Health employee.
Okay.
But I think that the city code is fairly clear on the matter, that it says for appointment of staff, it says the planning coordinator shall appoint such staff as may be necessary to carry out his duties, subject to an appropriate appropriations being made therefor. So I was actually going to approach the city solicitor on this point because of just because of the quandary I'm in terms of being able to effectively deliver a
Service.
CDBG program to the
Yes.
city without this person's services. So.
And you have the funding, so you're the one that's supposed to
Right.
appropriate it. Councilor Boisvert.
Say that so nicely. Could you explain, I'm looking here at you have a planning coordinator, deputy plan coordinator, and a principal planner. Could you explain the duties of the principal planner?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. The principal planner is next door, essentially doing planning board. For both the planning board and the conservation commission, we have special permits, site plans, subdivision plans that need to be reviewed and processed for their completeness. They have to be sent out for review by all the different departments that needs to respond to those. Applications, plans, comments, background info for the planning board packets for the weeks prior to the meeting. The legal notices have to go in the paper at the proper time, and a butters notice is mailed out. After the decision is made by the planning board, those decisions have to be written up in a defensible way that will survive appeals by both abutters that are opposed and by the applicant themselves that are aggrieved, and both have happened in the past. Checking the timetable for expirations, the required decision timeline, sending a notice of decisions to the abutters and the applicants. Roughly the same duties for the Conservation Commission. Also management of 53G accounts where we have to request money from developers, and then it has to be metered out to an engineer to do peer review for the planning studies that are submitted as part of the applications. Meeting with developers and potential applicants that come into the office all the time in terms of people wanting to develop a particular site. Responding to email inquiries and meeting with abutters and developers at the front counter. Need to check deeds for decision conformance of required notices.
Do you get
grants,
the
and easements.
understanding, Councilor Boisvert?
I get it, we got our money's
There's
worth.
it's
do with this all the time?
really more than a full-time job, and I'm getting some pressure from
I think
Tom
we got
Starr
it.
about the Conservation Commission getting
we
shortchanged
got it.
on the position.
What does he do with the rest of his time?
What's he do after lunch?
Councilor Donnelly.
Thank you, Mr. President. Dave, you won't be here. How many years ago did the mayor take the health inspector out of CDBG?
I think three years ago, he took one of them out. We were funding 2 for a long time, then he took one of them out. Then I think it was last year that he took the other one out. Was it last year
No.
or the year before?
Code inspectors?
The code enforcement.
It's
I believe
been,
last year was the first year that we
Yeah.
weren't funding the position at all.
Uh,
I believe last year was the first year we were not funding any positions out of the Board of Health.
Was that your suggestion?
No.
Was there any rationale to take him leave them out. Now, I'm just going back a couple of years. If you're trying to balance your budget, the only reason I've said it before, the only reason we get CDBG funds is because we're a poor community. It's there to eliminate slums and blight. If you're a money manager and you can use the money from another fund, this is a grant, why don't we continue to use it? I don't understand how it helped the city at all to take the funding from the CDBG program and put them to the city. So if you add up whatever we paid for the last few years because the mayor decided he would take it out of city funds, these are things that lead up to monetary problems. The program's 33 years, 34 years old,
33 years, yeah.
and it was working quite well using those funds, and then our mayor decided we should use city money for that. Just leads up to the problem. I don't know why it's there, why it's not being funded by CDBG. It does not have to be funded by the city, and it meets all the requirements. So there's $50,000, $60,000. I'm asking them now because it's going to come up under the Board of Health. Thank you.
Councillor Clark?
Thank you, Mr. President. Dave or Larry, the last technology funds, I notice you have zeros all the way across, and the mayor has in parentheses something short of $95,000. Is that a charge against your department? How does that work?
Some years ago, the city was given a technology fund by as part of the cable agreement.
Yep.
And it was to be used only for technology purposes. And when the mayor sent the departments letters saying the city's in an unprecedented fiscal crisis, you need to cut your budgets. I knew that he had been talking about creating an IT department anyhow.
Yes.
And I saw this as the perfect transition to an information technology department, whereby we use this fund, use a portion of this fund to pay for essentially a third of my time, and then Trevor's time, to people that do the technology in the city, and that would offset then the city expenses. So that's really the genesis of that.
But I'm still trying to figure out why you would put in, your request was for zero, though.
Yeah.
That was just put there. My request was significant. The amount I requested for all the different line items was, significantly different. And when he asked me to reduce the city amount
Okay.
from 263 to 129, it had to come from somewhere.
So do you know what your request was for this line?
Well, this was my request, but I hadn't considered using the technology fund for that purpose until we got that letter from the mayor. See, then we put our heads together and said, okay, what can we do that'll meet the city's needs and reduce the demand on the city budget?
So essentially, that $94,000 is an offset that would otherwise have been part of the city budget.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else on page 41? Councillor
quick one.
DiMartino?
Let me get to it here. Gone. We had the line item here for, I just lost it. Just give me a moment. Big difference. It was the program management, and it's down on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, on the 9th row. And there's a big difference in the numbers. In '06, it was 24,000, and now it's gone up to 40. Can you explain that to me?
Yeah, that was a two-thirds time position where the woman retired. You may recall Beverly, and it was replaced with the program management assistant, which is really a different position. It was put on the same line, but it's a full-time position.
And how much of that is block grant money?
That's 100%
Okay.
non-city,
Okay.
block grant and home.
So that's the new position upstairs.
That's right.
That's correct. And that also was used in part to offset the retirement of Jack McCarthy. The rehab program administrator that shows zeros, that position was never filled, but some of the administrative responsibilities he had needed to be picked up by another person. So the new hire covered both Beverly's previous job and the rehab program manager's job.
One more question. When we had the neighborhood liaison for 39 and then it went up to 43, was that city money or block grant money?
That was city money.
Well, that was the answer then. That's the answer. They took out that's the answer that we're looking for. Thank you very much. I know what happened now.
Councillor Clark. No, Councillor DeSalvatore.
David, the amount requested bottom line, is that your original bottom line?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you.
Moving on, councilors, to page 42, planning expenses. Amount requested, $52,850. Amount allowed by mayor, $52,850. Councilor DeSalvatore.
I'll start with the last question first. The bottom line, is that your original bottom line?
Yes, it is, Counselor.
Thank you.
Councilor Cruz.
Question for you. I understand that you have three categories: city, CBDG, and home. Could you, what exactly is home? Because they're all listed the same as. I understand the city, the CBDG, but I'm curious as to what home represents.
A home is essentially the home program. It really doesn't stand for anything. It was a separate program started within HUD by a different president with all different rules. It's just a big pain. They just put it under CDBG, it would have been great. But it's the home partnerships program. It provides housing money, essentially. It's all geared toward creating housing.
So with that said, am I to understand that we have to break it up because of the way the funds are coming into the city?
No, we do not have to break this up. This was provided in years past as for informational purposes, because the council wasn't seeing the appropriate federal expense items. This just started a few years ago. But it does create a level of confusion because there really isn't sufficient space to detail it out.
Okay. Thank you.
I guess my question would be, if you add up the total of all three of the departments, you have $8,400 or $8,500 worth of office expenses. I think that's probably triple of any other department. Is there any reason why your office expenses would be? I know that you can break them up and divvy them up, so maybe you have more pencils than everybody else, and that's probably a sign of success in life, but is there really a reason for $8,500 worth of office supplies?
I've never done an analysis of that, to be honest, Counselor. I don't think we spend any more money on office supplies than any other department. To some extent, that it's an arbitrary listing. We have a copy machine and we have computers for all the staff, right. And these are things these are costs that we need to allocate based on the jobs that they're doing. I don't know. Other departments probably just bury their office expenses in other categories.
And the other thing is travel and training. If you add up all three categories, you're up to about $6,600. Is that?
I don't think we spend it because we don't go too many places. I mean, I can get an exact number for you. I think I
Have
could.
a number?
I would have the city number. The other two accounts are within the administration budget in the home. It would require, analysis.
Okay.
Essentially, any travel or training associated with or that's eligible under the Community Development Block Grant or the home program is paid for out of those respective programs. So that the only amount, the $1,800 line item for office expenses and the $700 for travel and training are for those activities that are not part of the CDBG or home programs and thus would need to be billed to the city.
We just sent the new employee to Davis-Bacon training and to IDIS drawdown training, I know. And we sent another employee also to Davis-Bacon training. HUD periodically has training sessions that they make available at no charge to entitlement communities because some of the work that we do is it's very, very complicated and when you get some of the other federal regulations. But there's still expenses associated with going to this training in terms of the if only the mileage it's associated with it. But sometimes they're not held nearby, and you have to pay for an overnight or 2 overnights, that like in New Jersey or something.
Councilor DeSalvatore.
I realize it's not coming out of the city because it's under CDBG and home, but during a time of fiscal constraints, and we're looking at fringe benefits looks like a dirty word. Could you explain $120,000 worth of fringe benefits?
Well,
What that means?
That's the actual cost to the city that the employees on the other sheet would cost, so that not only do we pay the direct employees' costs, but we pay also their fringe benefit costs.
Through CDBG.
And it's shown on this page. You know, for CDBG and home-funded employees, we pay all of the costs associated with those employees.
Thank you.
Anything else on that page, councilors? Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Yes.
nothing on the page, but I need clarification of this. Tonight, we passed the budget for the block grant in the year 33. So the money for the 72 to police is gone. That's already established, and July 1st, that would start with that program. Okay? I'm correct?
As it stands now, yes.
Okay. Now, you've come up here and you've told us all, but there's a very, very big word at the end, exemption. You'd have to write in and get an exemption from HUD to do this. And would that not go into the year 34? Because we've already earmarked the money for the year 33, and that is for the target areas for overtime for the police. Now, if we did hire a policeman with the same money, they would also have to work in the target area. Am I correct?
We need to check with HUD about that. We got a change in the way they calculate the income limits, whereas prior to that change, the city was at 50.7% low mod.
Yes.
Now we are at about 53% low mod,
Okay.
which now means any activity that benefits the entire city would be eligible for, in terms of low mod benefit. We need to confirm that analysis with HUD. It is our assertion that the change that would be proposed would represent a minor change and not require a public hearing. That determination is made locally, that we would, of course, as a courtesy, run that by HUD, but we're responsible for making that determination locally.
And that's not stretching it a bit, is it?
We don't feel that it is, and we've done very well with this program for a long time.
I know you've done a great job with it, but I think it's stretching it a bit. Just wanted that on record, that I think you're stretching it a bit.
We don't want to stretch it, so we will run that by our HUD representative.
I just want, because it's like, it's all very well to say, well, we're going to do this and we're going to move this and we move that, but you have strict guidelines, and to me, it's not a fit, but I just wanted to make that public,
Councilor, we do have very strict guidelines, and in fact, HUD would not allow us to normally fund a position that was previously funded by the city in the past year.
Yeah.
But the conditions on which they allow an exception are when it's beyond the control of the local government. And given the fact that we can show substantial amount of evidence that the city is facing a fiscal crisis, we believe that HUD would approve a request for an exception. We would have to ask them for that, but we believe they would approve it.
Yeah,
that would be that would be one step that would have to take place, but the mayor would have to first direct us to do so, and would have to request a transfer and appropriation of the funds from the drug enforcement to perhaps to pick up a patrolman's salary.
But then they would lose the money for the drug enforcements.
or at least most of it. I don't know what the
Yeah.
typical patrolman's salary is. I believe there's $72,000 that was
Yeah,
approved.
72, yeah.
So that, a portion of that could be used could be retained for drug enforcement, and a portion of it could go to cover a police officer's salary,
Well,
if
HUD
it
could,
was so desired.
HUD could also come back to you and say to you, it's not that we're in a fiscal crisis, we're in a mismanagement of fiscal management. So therefore, that would be another technicality that they come back to you for. Thank you very much.
Just, Councilor DeSalvatore, you almost made it.
David, since Annie hung on to you for a little bit, a question did come up. Since you stated yourself that you don't go anywhere, question is, if we zeroed out your travel and training, what would you end up losing?
Well, I didn't say I didn't want to go somewhere.
Well, you have, travel and training is quite substantially
honest.
under CDBG, as well as shows up under home. And I'm wondering, under the city account side, under travel and training, would you be losing or not?
Well, travel and training can provide conferences for planning board members. We send them it's very low-cost training. It's like $50, $100 each. And it's important, I feel, to have well-trained planning board members. So that's one area that we'd lose. Also, when we do inspections of subdivisions, the principal planner needs to go and drive around to the different projects that are being done, both for Conservation Commission and Planning Board, and those costs aren't eligible under the CDBG or home program. So I wouldn't be able to cover those expenses. So I do need some money in those accounts.
Okay, thank you. You saved it.
Councilor Clark?
Mr. President, thank you. I just wanted to clarify on the police. If the money, CDBG money, was 72, and a first-year officer was maybe 50 or 55, the remainder of that money could still be with the drug suppression unit?
Certainly.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
They can.
Moving on to page 63, Recreations Department. Personal Services, amount requested $146,493. Amount allowed $125,233,000. I guess you can explain, we've talked about it, there's a couple of decreases because of reducing the amount of playgrounds and
Sure.
the smaller populated ones.
Yeah. Good evening, councilors. On the different cuts that we've had so far, on the playground instructors, obviously was the biggest hit we had to take. That 20 number should say 16. Somehow it didn't get crossed out.
Number 61, right?
It should say 16.
63.
The 15,000 difference there mostly is the 4 playground instructors we had to cut, and also the program has been cut 2 weeks. It was an 8-week program. I actually added 2 weeks when I started here 4 summers ago. They used to start after the 4th, and that's what we're doing now, so that's the difference there. Mostly lifeguards, head lifeguard, water attendants is all a week difference. We cut a week off.
Councilor DiMartino.
Is the pool opening?
The pool is scheduled to open on Friday.
On this Friday coming.
Yes.
All the lifeguards are in place?
Yes, they are. We're in the process of finishing up right now.
That'll be good news to a lot of people. It's because there was a rumor around town you weren't opening the pool. So I thought I'd get that out there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anything else on that page, councilors? Councilor Clark.
I don't know if I guess it would be this page, Mr. President, and that is that I know that Parks Board talked about creating some sort of fee to use the pool for security measures, because from time to time it probably gets a little crowded and things happen. What about the security issue? And was it a unanimous feeling amongst the board that it was no to charge any kind of fee down there?
Chairman Raschuti and I worked very hard to try to get that fee instituted, well over a year.
Yep.
We brought every option. We took the mayor down to Leominster, see how they work it. We went online, looking at different things, how to charge, what kind of machinery we need, and we laid it all out, and pretty much we were the only two that went for it.
So how, and the need for that fee was to provide security. Take that fee and not only provide security, but some other things you may need down there, because you're going to need some more income.
Yeah, I mean, that was the big piece. It was for security, but I mean, if you look at the budget, our electricity and pool chemicals, I mean, most of that is for the pool. It's like half of our expense budget at least. That could help offset some of that.
So how is the security matter going to be held this year, the same as it has in the past?
Somewhat. I still got to meet with the police chief. Obviously, with the layoffs there, we might not get more help. It'll probably be the same as in the past. We do have some bigger lifeguards down there that will hopefully help out. And I mean, the police have been pretty good when we call. They're usually right there.
Well, I wouldn't give up on the, maybe the time is not right, but I wouldn't give up on the idea of the cost to use the pool. And we can't do it now, but I would think that maybe over the winter and we can gather more evidence, and I think it's worth the cost, quite frankly.
I agree with. I mean, if there's a time to do it, I think it would be right now.
It might be too late right now. Thanks, Andy.
Councilor Connery?
Yes, Mr. Roy, do we have the same amount of playgrounds open this summer as we did last summer?
There will be two less.
And which playgrounds are those?
We had nine playgrounds last year. Well, 7. South Street School, which I added a couple years back, and also Phillips Street in West Fitchburg.
So South Street and Phillips Playground will not be staffed this year.
Correct.
Thank you.
Councilor DiMartino?
When the pool was brought in, there was a reason why no fee was allowed. It was to do with how we got the money to make the pool a reality. And in one of the, it was made note at that time that there would not be a fee charged, and that was to do with how the funding came in. So I think the planning department upstairs has all that information.
Yeah, we've looked into that. It was a CDBG, and how much, the percentage-wise, how much money was used for that, and it came out to, I think it was 41%
Yeah.
CDBG. So we would have to give
back
40%
something.
back to it.
Yes, that was the reason why there was no fee. Thank you.
For the life of the pool, or for us,
Yeah.
if we started doing it at a certain
Life of
time?
the pool.
For the life of it.
Yeah.
Because it was built with CDBG grant money.
The life of the pool.
Okay, moving on to page 64. Expenses requested $55,000, allowed by the mayor $45,000. Councilor DeSalvatore?
Looking at vehicle maintenance and gas, I'm finding it difficult to believe with the vehicle I think I've seen you driving around in, that you would only have $750 in gas here. And as a ward councilor, I know on my small Jimmy, I put more in a year in gas, going around just my ward. And you're covering the entire city in a fairly large truck. Now, the truck itself, I mean, is it, are you moving a lot of equipment? Is the size of that truck an absolute essential? Can you do with a car? Is this a justified
Yeah,
vehicle?
I use that vehicle whenever I'm working. I mean, especially during the winter. I mean, I work a lot of nights with basketballs, going to different gyms, and if you want to go look in and out, there's plenty of supplies in there now. And that's about the gas that I use. I mean, I don't use it when I'm not working.
Thank you.
Councilor DiMartino?
Do you take that vehicle home with you?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Councilor Cruz?
Vance, can you tell me what special events you
Oh, yeah, most of the special events, that's mostly like the seasonal parties like Halloween, Christmas, Easter, and some of our concerts on the Common are also included in that. So the more we have, the more we can do with those events.
You said that includes the parks at the Common, the concerts at the Common also?
Some of them, we get Workers' Credit Union helps us out as well.
What, if anything, has been cut? Had you had gotten the 4,500?
I think it's more what we can do. We can add things. You know what I mean? We can do different special events. We do different dedications. That some expenses come up for that.
So you're saying 3,500 is adequate enough?
3,500 as well.
Is adequate enough?
Yeah, I think so.
Thank you.
Again, if you look at the board over here, right out inside City Hall, it says the activities that are being coordinated by the Recreation Department. I believe a lot of people in the city take advantage of those because they're fair priced, and they're something to do for the citizens. With the low budget that he has, he gets the best for his dollar, I believe. So, good job on that. Anything else, councilors? That's it for this evening.
Oh, thank God we're
Motion
going
made,
home early.
second to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned.